Mute button. Hi, folks. Welcome to this afternoon's Chu and Chat. I'm Hazel Chu, your Lord Mayor of Dublin City. And per usual, we give a bit of housekeeping. So this session will be recorded. And your questions, when I ask your questions, I only give first name only. So there will be no breach of GDPR or data privacy, and we will try to ask and answer all your questions, but where we can't or we don't have time, if you can email it to us at lordmayor@dublincity.ie, we'll try to get an answer from you. So I set up these sessions because due to COVID, there is no chance to talk to certain people, have events and reach out to the city. So this way, we wanted to bring a piece of what is happening behind the doors in Dublin City Council to yourselves and talk about different things within the city. Transport, planning is today, culture was last week, nighttime culture was last week, and we started off with Owen Keegan, our chief executives. Feel free to eat your lunch because I'm going to be. I picked up mine from the jerk chicken place across the road that just started up. If you haven't tried, do, because it's very tasty. So today we have Ali Grehan, our city architect, and John O'Hara, our head of planning, with us today. If you have any questions, put it in the chat box and we'll try to ask them as we go along. I usually kick off with asking both guests to tell us a little bit about themselves, about their careers, what they do. So just for a very short 5 minutes. Ali, I'm going to start with you first.
Hi, everybody. Okay, yeah, I'm city architect and I was appointed as city architect in 2008. So that's going back a while. And it was just before the crash. So I suppose my time in the city council has seen the all of the kind of the excitement and the quite intense development that was happening even in 2008, the aftermath of the crash, and how we've really picked ourselves up since then, and now, to be honest, our projects and the programs are as intense as they ever were. Before I came to the city council, I was in Ballymun Regeneration, and I was there for several years. I also did 2 years in Fingal County Council, which was very interesting. And then before I worked with what was called the Light Rail Project Office. It's now TII, Transport Infrastructure Ireland, and I worked on delivering the first two Lewis lines, the Green Line and the Red Line, which was really interesting because it was new and everything was starting up new. Before that, I was in the private sector. I worked in London and Dublin. But in terms of the city council and city architects, I have a team there are 93 of us on the city architects team. And that would include building inspectors and dangerous building inspectors and admin. And then there are about 65 architects and technicians and engineers. And we cover a pretty wide program of work. I have 5 teams on housing projects across everything from small extensions to large regeneration projects. There's a public realm team. There's a team who work on the civic program. And there's a team of engineers, small team of engineers who do a lot of our give structural advice and would do enabling works for us for projects. So it's a huge and it's a big and exciting program, and I'm happy to take any questions about the program in more detail.
Well, we're going to go to questions in a bit, but I'm going to come back to you in a second, Ali, in other things. John, a bit about yourself and what you do and your team.
Hello, Lord Mayor and everybody else. Well, my name's John O'Hara. I'm the City Planning Officer for Dublin City here. I've been the City Planning Officer for 4 years. Before that, I worked as a senior planner with the city, and before that, I worked with Liverpool City Council with their Docklands areas principally, and previously I worked with Essex County Council, and also when I started my career, it was in Belfast in the north. So that's my career really. Currently. I had head of a department with about 60 planners, 10 or 12 conservation experts, together with an administration section. We are collectively responsible for the production of development plans for the city, local area plans, strategic development zones. I've been centrally involved in the Docklands SDZs for the past 6, 7, 8 years, and it's been a source of great pride, I think, to the planning department that that in taking over that from the Docklands Development Agency, we've managed to progress it. Within conservation, we deal with record protected structures. We have 8,700 of those in the city, with architectural conservation areas, and also the grant system to enable people to repair and restore their buildings. There are 3 teams involved in the dealing with planning applications in the city. We deal with well over 3,000 planning applications per annum. Again, that's a heavy workload, but there has to be constant collaboration between the people who deal with planning applications and the policy making section and the conservation section. We also have an archaeological section as well. So that's the breadth of the department. It's very exciting, interesting work, but challenging at the same time. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Ali, we just launched a city, well, we sent out for consultation for a city development plan since we're going through a new iteration of it. What are your thoughts on that? What do you want to see in it, and how do you fit into the overall of it?
Well, the plan is John is heading the development plan. City architects, yes, we'll contributing, and we're working actually very closely with John's team on dealing with, on trying to just propose ideas for very specific issues, as in detailed design issues. I'm not going to go into it here because it's just still at discussion stage, but and also to look at how we can contribute to ideas about climate action and the built environment. It's very important, and design quality generally. So architectural criteria that can be applied. It is a difficult area because, you know, design quality is it's hard to communicate sometimes because it seems quite subjective. You know, what one person likes, another person dislikes, but it is possible to have kind of reach some sort of universal agreement as to what constitutes good design. And so we're trying to just explore that in the development plan. But really, you know, I'm not going to cut across John here, and it's very much his area. So, but so if he wants to contribute, say something here, and then we can bounce it around.
Yeah, well, here's one of the questions that came in. There's a good few questions coming in now, but one of them just touched on something here. What are the main issues planners and architects frequently bump heads over? So what's your thoughts on that before I go to John on that question?
Look, at their, if you just look at, at a polar extremes, planners take a very strategic macro view. I'm talking about like the extremes. There's a whole range, but I mean, at an extreme, planners would take a macro strategic view. Architects are, I suppose, because we design buildings and places, we I suppose are hyper conscious of the reality of how things translate on the ground. Yeah. But obviously there's a whole range of, there are architects who are very interested in urban design. There are planners who are very conscious about how things happen on the ground. So it's, look, it's just the usual. What do we bump heads over? disagreeing about what constitutes good design, but that's just something, you know, that's a dialogue.
Friendly disagreement.
We get on very well.
So, John, we get on very well was the last thing Ali said. So I figured Ali covered that question, but what are your thoughts on the development plan? And there's a question here from Marion saying, is the development plan redundant in light of SHGs, many of which are material contravention of development plan? So give us a thought about, give us your thoughts about the upcoming development plan, and what you think in light of what Marion is asking there, in light of SHGs, doesn't make it redundant.
Well, I suppose the first thing to say is that we've just started the work on the new development plan for 2022-2028. We are going through the submissions from the first phase at the moment, and we have received over 700 submissions, which is fantastic response from the public out there. Twice as many as received from the last development plan back in 2016. So that's a fantastic response, and I think that points to the fact that the citizens of Dublin see the development plan as more than just talking about SHDs. There are a whole lot of issues that have come back in that consultation that we need to look at in drawing up the draft development plan. There's a whole emphasis on, say, post-COVID greening the city, a whole emphasis on climate change, how we make the city a more compact city. There's and yet retain quality. The development plan will talk also about the notion that's growing about the 15-minute city, whereby all your facilities, all your schools, your shops, your entertainment, and all of that, all those good things to make life worth living are within 15 minutes by good public transport or walking or cycle. There's an emphasis again on conservation in our city of the built heritage, and there's an overlap with the work that Ali does, you know, including things about retrofitting and reuse and repurposing our heritage buildings. That's very important too. So all of that stuff is part of the development plan. SHDs specifically refer is this issue about where strategic housing developments can go straight to An Bord Pleanála. Yes, that has caused a lot of anxiety amongst residents and our elected members. That has to be said. But the SHD process was only a limited intervention by government in order to kickstart higher density in housing. It will end, and I understand, next January, February, long before the new development plan comes into effect. So it is not a central part of the development plan, but I have to say quality, density, good place making is part of what we need to think about in the new development plan.
You're on mute, Lord Mayor.
Apologies. While we were finishing up on the SHG there, John, there's a question from Garrett. How do we deal with An Bord Pleanála granting planning permission on SHG developments when Dublin City Council planners have opposed it in their planning reports?
Well, as the standard response to that is, that's a very interesting question. The point is, the SHDs were brought in by government legislation in 2016. Okay, so government legislation is government legislation. We, as a local planning authority, cannot override legislation. People have their democratic right to influence their TDs, their ministers, to get legislation changed if they see fit. But from our point of view, the SHD process allows for the chief executive, the planning department, to give its opinion, and we do give our opinion. We do bring it to the area committee, to our councillors, and by legislation, the comments of the councillors have to be brought to An Bord Pleanála, and An Bord Pleanála have to make the decision then in accordance with the new legislation. If you ask for my personal view, I think there is an issue there that An Bord Pleanála has always been held revered as, say, the the body, an appeal body, a fair referee, but they're being asked to be both judge and jury. So on the appeal process, the standard appeal process, of which they were the experts in, now increasingly gets pushed into the courts. If I were to give my own personal view, I think that's a regrettable because it should the decision on appeal should stay within on board Panola. That's I think maybe as far as I can go. Yeah.
Thank you, John. I know Ali has some opinions on this. Ali, can I bring you in?
Well, no, it's more the broader issue, and myself and John were chatting about this earlier. It's the broader issue that really we are, as a local authority, we are very dependent and subject to decisions at a central level. Central government decisions. I mean, and that, okay, the SHD is one decision. Regulations governing building standards are another decision. For example, I mean, something that, and I don't want to change the subject because people might have other questions about SHDs, but just for example, the whole issue of embodied carbon in buildings. We're delivering a housing program. We look at, for example, we're delivering a building program. If something like measuring the embodied carbon in buildings isn't set out under a national standard or regulation, that it must be part of an assessment rather than our current building regulations, which really just govern how the energy performance of buildings in use. If we don't have a central government decision that we need to measure the whole life cycle carbon of a building, we will never actually be able to have a discussion as to whether it is more efficient, effective, sustainable to keep existing buildings and refurbish them versus demolish them and build new buildings. I mean, that's a discussion that's going on around Europe. But ultimately, Dublin City Council can't step in and insist that or make decisions about even our own building stock, for example, a housing programme, when the imperative is to only address one half of it, one side of it. So generally in local authorities in Ireland are, I think somebody, research was done in this, which showed that local authorities in Ireland are actually one of the most centrally controlled in Europe. And that's just the way it is. So
we are more centralized than Albania, than Moldova. I actually did a session on this with CRLG last night, talking about decentralization in government and how if we are ever to get some things done, we need to start having more local authority power. We need to have local government reform and have more power on local authorities and the council and the local councillors as well. You talked about regulations and how in some cases we're subjected to what the national framework is. Lily just asked a question there. Well, what good is a development plan if the regulations is from a national point of view and that's led by urban development and building height, etc.? Like, what would you change, Ali, if it was up to you? And how do you think we can make sure that even though it's centralized and things are from a national framework, we can still build a city that is sustainable and we can love?
The city council still has huge influence, and the development plan is hugely important. I mean, we do. There would be other bodies in, say, that are deal with issues in Dublin like transport that would probably similarly say, gosh, I wish we could control everything. But so there has to be an awful lot of collaboration and networking that goes on to make things happen. And Dublin City Council has huge influence. The development plan is hugely important. It has huge influence in bringing different groups together. So I'm not saying we can't do important things. I'm just saying that if, for example, you compare us, we get compared, and we're always looking at other cities and people say, why can't you do what they did there? The reality is you have to look at your own given context. And in Dublin, our context is very particular, and we have to do an awful lot of networking and collaboration to get things done.
Okay, agreed. Well, talking about comparing other cities, there is a comparison question, but it's about pedestrianisation. So I'm going to move this on one on to John. What kind of things delay the implementation of pedestrianisation in central Dublin compared to other cities in Ireland and Europe, John? So what is it that's delaying certain pedestrianisations in the city in light of COVID and in light of what we have to do to build a better public realm?
Well, it's a complex question again. What is delayed pedestrianisation? Well, I do see and reeling in the years that that Grafton Street was pedestrianised back in the 80s, whereas other cities, Copenhagen and cities like that, Amsterdam, are pedestrianised or part of them pedestrianised much earlier. I think the key thing is that in those cities they have excellent public transport, tram lines and an underground system, so you can get people in and out of the city with and therefore free up the surface between buildings for pedestrianised areas more readily. So what has happened in Ireland is because we still do not have any sort of underground system. There's competition for the surface between buildings, and up until recently, it was accepted that by generally that cars were needed to transport people into the city, A, for commuting, B, for shopping. Also, the Liffey it sort of tends to bunch cars up to the crossing points of the Connaught Street and Butt Bridge, so that concentrates cars that up until now they have felt that they had to go through College Green. So we are working, as you know, on pedestrianisation areas around Grafton Street and on College Green. So you may say it's belated, but we are working those on pedestrianisation, and it is more important post-COVID than ever because people want to eat out and experience outdoor activities. But the corollary of that is we must enhance the metro or speed up the metro line, the more Lewis lines, and the bus connects. We do have opposition, and we will have opposition to all of those. So I would make a plea here for civic responsibility throughout this, because the other thing, in order to get vitality and that into the city post-COVID, we've got to get more population in the city. We've got to get more living in the city, more living over the shop. That means that we have to get 60 to 70,000 extra population in the next 6-7 years into the city. We have to do that in a responsible way, in a civically minded way, because at the end of the day, it is our nieces and nephews and brothers and sisters and that we're catering for in the future. Rather than promoting urban sprawl out into the hinterland. So it is really important that quality pedestrianisation, quality open space, quality public realm is part of the mix here.
I'm going to bring Ali in a second, John, but just on touching on the living above shop living. So my office is just off Grafton Street here, and right now it's of course empty. But even when it's not empty, there's not that much above shop living going on. What can we do to incentivize that and to make it actually a lived-in city, so that you do have that footfall and you do have that community building? What can we do?
Well, we've already worked with the Department of Finance and that, and brought in a tax incentive scheme to promote living over the shop. But for all those good reasons that you mentioned there, it makes the streets safer, it restores our heritage buildings, and it brings population into the city and gives vitality in that. But the tax incentive scheme is not working, has not worked. We're currently investigating how to bring other measures in. It may be necessary to bring in a grant scheme because I think the people, shop owners, not on cafes, restaurants on the ground floor. If I were without my feeling is, and without supporting evidence, is that shop owners are reluctant to make the break, so that you could have to vacate your shop for 6 or 8 months in order to allow the conversion of the places upstairs. That means a break in your trade. And also there's a higher risk if you have apartments that upstairs. There's a higher risk that your stock might be damaged or whatever by people letting their baths overrun or whatever like that. It's simple things like that might be deterrent, but we'll have to carry out more investigation into that. But they are silly, simple things we can address them.
Thank you, John. Ali, so back to, I know you want to contribute on the pedestrianisation and on how we kind of build the public realm of the city. It is something that we need to think more on. What are your thoughts? And there's a few questions here, extra questions here for you as well.
Yeah, but I mean, we have been doing an awful lot. All of those COVID mobility measures that people have seen slowly kind of working, rolling out around the city, all of the much better cycle lane network. That has been going on over the course of since COVID hit. So I think it's important for people to recognize that. Public realm is the big it's the big battleground. It's where all of the city council departments meet, because every single city council department has some kind of role to play in the public realm. It's where the citizens and the city meet. It's where we do have this whole issue about whether do people believe in the city? Do people want to live in the city centre? Or do people want to do people prefer to live outside the city and drive in? And that in itself then undermines the quality of life for people living in the city, and it makes it less attractive. So it's something that just we have to go together. But I mean, I looked at my own team in City Architects. I think we have about 50 projects under the public realm team. And that wouldn't include everything that the Parks Department are doing and that the roads engineers are doing. So there's an awful lot of work happening. But on the other hand, it is challenging work, because there are so many, because the public realm is used by everybody. Therefore, it has to meet all these competing needs. And all of those competing needs have to be listened to and have to be facilitated. And then we reach agreement. College Green is a good example. We went for planning on that. We thought we had. I think we hoped and we thought that we were going to get permission, but we didn't get permission. Now we've got to go again, and we will go again. But so it's something that we just have to keep pushing on. Ultimately, the public realm will improve when people appreciate that urban living is really sustainable. It can be amazing, but we need more people living in the city and more people to accept that we need to make the streets for people, for enjoyment, for pleasure, for play, not for cars.
It's funny you touch on cars there, because one of the questions from Neil here is, well, surely to increase this public realm and interest in public realm and for safe public realm, then the default when we look at speed limits and look at how cars are traveling, that we should be lowering the speed from 50 to 30. That makes sense, right? So like it does to me. Like for yourself, Ali, I guess it'd be good to get your answer on that, but also to get your answer on, well, are there lessons, Greg wants to know, are there lessons to draw from the experience of COVID for the design of future housing? And then I have some from John as well.
Yeah, I do think we should have a 30 speed limit, because, and I know when you're in a car, it does feel like you're driving very slow. But the fact is, you should be driving slowly through a city. You shouldn't be blasting your way through a city. And it's not, the streets aren't motorways in the city. They're for people. And people have to be able to use those streets safely. So I'm all in favour of those speed limits. Housing and COVID, yes, absolutely. I think that COVID has demonstrated that people are, if we are going to enable people to work remotely, if we're going to have a more flexible approach to work, if we're going to enable healthy living, I think COVID has been a real eye opener. People need decent space standards in their homes, and their homes should be places where which can meet most of their needs. And so I do think that COVID has shone a light on how we need to ensure that people have better quality housing in Dublin. And I mean, when we do public housing, our public housing is of such a high standard. Our developments, and I think that they are what we do with public housing is really an exemplar for how housing should be generally.
Sorry, I don't know why I couldn't unmute there. John, I'm going to move that over to yourself then. We look at public housing, we look at space in Dublin, and there is a lot of derelict space as well. There's a comment here from one of the audience who asked, well, what are we going to do with it? So, and how are we going to look at how we use kind of derelict spaces and vacant spaces to improve as we go along?
Yeah, we have done a complete audit of the vacant space and derelict sites in the city a few years ago, and as a result of that, there's a vacant sites levy now, where if your site is vacant, you have to pay a 7% levy on it, and that's not as a punishment. That's in order to encourage people to bring forward their sites for good uses. Although we've concentrated on our vacant lands and brownfield lands. A lot of them are very small sites, but if you add them all together, it's 4%, I think, which is the equivalent of a lot of cities. So we're not that bad, but it's just when you comparatively, but when you put a searchlight on, they are valuable space that need to be brought into use. But they are complex in a city because whilst we haven't been a heavy industrial city with contaminated land, there are still lots of old infrastructure and pipes and things underneath land. There are some contamination. Some sites need archaeological resolution, and most of the sites there actually are issues of ownership and competing ownerships. That might be a thing that we need to look at. Compulsory purchase order powers, as you know, in this country, the primacy of land ownership and even the integrity of disputing land ownership seems to override the public interest. So it might be something that should be looked at, CPOing lands, and if they can't be brought forward, or the threat of a CPO might be a good incentive. But it is important, and we will be bringing policies back forward in new development plan for making best use of brownfield lands, backfield lands, to make sure that all available land is used for something beneficial to the city, and that doesn't have to be construction and building all place. It can be allotments, gardens, biodiversity areas. So the whole tapestry of the city can be enhanced by making good use of those vacant sites.
And do you think the 7% levy is actually working when it comes to derelict or vacant sites?
If you were to ask my personal view, I don't think it's having the motivational effect that it was meant to have. That's why I suggested there may be a more of another stick, maybe, or as well as the carrot of saying that your land can make a big contribution to the city.
I think that would be, because this is the thing. I think we look at kind of the stock and wonder, is the 7% working? I know 7% may be a lot in some people's minds, but when it's applied, maybe certain landowners just don't see it, or site owners. Ali, to you, tell me, you mentioned conservation there. So what are the challenges of protecting a historic city like Dublin and protecting the fibre of Dublin City while creating a modern city? Greg here was asking how does the public support the council's work in Dublin to conserve significant structures and being able to support members of the public to preserve important buildings. So can you, I guess the first bit is what are the challenges, and then moving on to Greg's question on what can the public do to support?
Well, I suppose the challenges in conserving buildings is every building's different, and historic build, so each historic building will have its own challenges. It's a very expert area of work, so it requires a lot of expertise and effort to actually get conservation work right. I mean, I think I'm not sure if the question is really about, whether it's better to retain a lot of our existing buildings and, is there too much conservation or is there not enough conservation? And what about creating a new identity for Dublin? I don't know, these are really complex areas, and the city has to constantly, the city is a live thing, and it will constantly evolve, and hopefully, I mean, what we should always be conscious of when we do new developments is absolutely we need to be conscious that we are hopefully creating an architectural legacy for the future, and that in 100 years people will be looking at these buildings and saying, gosh, we absolutely we need to preserve them. And I think that's a good question that really anybody, a developer and their team should ask themselves when they do a building. Are we building a building for the future? But look, I just think we have an amazing city, and definitely the city council, and John will, I'm sure, talk more about this, but definitely the city council is very conscious that we do need to preserve the architectural and cultural identity of Dublin. But there are many shades of Dublin as you move from the city centre out, and there's lots of opportunity for more contemporary development, for creating a new Dublin in the Docklands areas, for example. Out in Poolbeg, there's huge opportunity in the outer areas, and that we simultaneously celebrate and love and value our historic buildings, because absolutely, we always hear this, say, from Fáilte Ireland or a group like that. They will say, people come to Dublin to see the historic centre, and so we have to appreciate that, build on that, but also absolutely create an evolving identity for the city. And I'd just like to say that again. I would really hope that any developer developing a site would look at that site and say, I really hope in 100 years somebody's campaigning to keep that building I'm building.
Okay, someone has noticed the picture behind you. Robert asked, I see pictures of the first phase of the regeneration of Dolphin House behind Ali. Is there a specific reason that the other phases haven't yet progressed? So is this one for you or one for John?
I think it's for me. There's the reason we haven't progressed the other phases yet isn't because we aren't working on it. We are actually working very hard, but there's been intense interaction with the community in living in Dolphin House as to how they want to see the rest of the site developed. And we've been working with them on agreeing a master plan. We've developed we're nearly at planning application stage for another block fronting onto of about 30 apartments fronting onto Dolphin's Barn. That's being developed as an architectural proposal, standalone. So we're simultaneously agreeing the master plan for all of the future phases with the residents of Dolphin House, and we're progressing the design and of the next block. So it's we haven't. We're very much on the case in Dolphin House.
Thank you, Ali. And the next one I think is for John. It's about Gulliston. So there's very specific area questions now, and then I'll move back on to wrap up on one of Robert's more general questions here. From Kieran here, he wants to know in relation to, I'm guessing he's from the community there. He wants to know where is the engagement with the community on Gulliston, and whether they can see the current plans on display and whether they can comment publicly. I know that's something that I'm as one of the councillors in the area would be working with yourselves on. So John, do you have any comments up for Kieran on how the public can tie in?
Yeah, thanks. Gulliston is one of those sites that we've just talked about. It's a vacant site with the size of a football pitch, brownfield site in the middle of one of our most vibrant villages in the city. So it's incumbent on us all to make sure that we make the best use of that land. Both Ali and myself have been working with our elected members, and we've looked at previous plans for this area to draw up a good mix of uses for this area as a draft. So the first stage is to work up something that's viable that from ourselves, from our point of view. So we've been looking at a mixture of cost rental, which is important, and a new primary healthcare centre for the Rathmines area, and a new aged persons home there, or group of buildings there, all around a new central plaza. So we have heard from the community in the past, and 2 or 3 years ago, and we've integrated all of those into our thinking. So we've gone to the councillors now in order to agree with the council. Once that happens, and once we get the terms of agreement that we might be able to go to the HSE and the approved housing bodies to get those key ingredients in place, once we get the principles, then we will definitely talk we'll have meetings and consultation with the public and surrounding residents, because it is a blend of getting the principles right and consulting with the public and getting endorsement from our elected members, well, our elected representatives. That's one thing I want to stress in all this, in making the development plan and doing our conservation work and all. We do work with our area committees and with our 63 elected members, and at the end of the day, it is the elected members that make policy for this city, including the development plan. So it is incumbent on us all to work with our elected members to make sure that we have endorsement and buy-in from everybody.
Yep, and in relation to Gulliston, I'm hoping that, as John says, we can bring it to the public soon. There has been a lot of work, especially in the recent weeks. I have to commend John and his team, and Ali and her team on the work they've done on it. It's actually progressed, especially in the last couple of months, a long way. So we're hoping that as soon as possible, we'd be able to bring it back to the public to have comments themselves on it.
Sure.
So in relation to John, like we talked about COVID, we talked about public realm, we talked about kind of revamping spaces, but like in relation to planning and zoning, of one of the key issues, and I see it kind of being brought up here in the questions, is that there are a lot of, especially kids and families, individuals that all want more green space and more zoning for green space. And we seem to be in a severe lack of it at the moment. We have our parks, of course, but like just even recently with some of the GAA clubs and playing fields, there's just not enough space. How do we make sure moving into the future that firstly that we have more, that we can zone for more facilities and green space? And the second part, which is one of the questions here, how do we make sure when the community buildings are being revamped, that they get revamped along with the rest of the community? They're just not left behind. So how does that happen to ensure that community spaces are revamped as we go along as well? So firstly, how do we get more space in terms of green space and playing fields and the lot? And secondly, how do we make sure community buildings are revamped and brought along so that community it's fit for purpose?
Yeah, I refer to the development plan, the local plans, and all the submissions we received. And as I said at the outset, there are many submissions addressing or hitting that very issue about how we get more green space and quality green space. I think one of the things to stress is that we have to make more use of our green space, and maybe dual use, multi-use of green space in our city. The other thing we need to look at and will review are the spaces that are associated with schools and colleges, and whether they can be made more permanent in the new development plan. And again, that will go out in second public display and come before our 63 councillors. We're also looking at the idea of how community facilities and cultural facilities are retained and enhanced in new developments in the city. So every major proposal has to have an audit accompanying it with regard to cultural facilities and community facilities in the area, which identifies any deficit and then proposes how they address those deficits. So that is already laced into the STZ, and it'll probably be laced in, subject to agreement with the councillors, into the new development plan as well. So that is at the forefront of our mind, surely, because the important thing is to say is that the corollary of higher quality density, of more people, more population in the city, is definitely higher quality and better open space and community and cultural facilities. And the other thing that we have to fit in as well, and again, as Ali said, this is not just a matter of colouring maps green and purple. It's a matter of being actively engaged in the management of this and the promotion of this. It's about how you get biodiversity into the city as well, because sometimes you have playing fields maybe not be conducive to biodiversity. So we have to marry all of this together with our canals or river, or the Liffey or other rivers, and and of course we haven't touched on yet, flood resilience has to be integrated as well. So I'm not saying this is easy, but we're doing our best to work it through.
Yeah, and I've seen, especially with the works from Les from Parks and Michael and the team there, they've done a lot of work when it comes to biodiversity through COVID and before. But then again, it breaks my heart. Then there are people that are chopping down trees just so we can see billboards in Rathmines and in Ranelagh. It's just like we would like to make sure we can push for as much as possible when it comes to biodiversity, but we need to bring people along as well. Yeah. Ali, what are your thoughts in relation to kind of the revamping of community spaces, and also in terms of getting more in for green spaces and facilities?
I think John pretty much covered everything, but just to say the bloody word COVID again, but it certainly has taught us. It's not just taught us to, forced us out to use the find and use the green spaces we have, but it's also completely changed how we use our open spaces. Because I remember, a few years ago we would remark how culturally in Dublin, people didn't seem to really use our parks, particularly intensively. And you'd see, and whereas you'd go abroad and you'd see people picnicking in parks and city parks all the time, and things like that. Now everybody's picnicking in the park. It's the only place you can actually go. So, for example, places like, and it's been a great gift over the last year, Grange Gorman, the new campus at Grange Gorman has absolutely, not only is it working really wonderfully as a great connector between, across, two communities on either side of Grange Gorman. Now you can suddenly walk from Broadstone or Parnell Square. You can walk from Parnell Square to Stony Batter in a very short while through this amazing new campus. And it's been an incredible gift to the city. And in the morning, if you're walking through Grange Gorman, it's incredibly lovely to see all the kids on their scooters coming through the little gates as they make their way across to a school. And so I think after, hopefully, when all this COVID COVID is over, that we'll actually be looking at our public spaces in an entirely different way. And there will be more demand, because ultimately it's what do people want? I mean, do people want green spaces? Because if people want green spaces, we will give them green spaces. But it's really about if what do people want? And I think after COVID, people will be looking and saying, gosh, you know, we really need to have a more attractive, green, humane city with all that goes with it, including better parks, better streets. So yes, the business community centres, we do need to. I think people are aching to get back to kind of interact face to face. They're aching to get back into the library. Our public libraries are the most amazing resource. They are community centres. But it is important to make sure that community centres are genuinely community centres and they are accessible to everybody. So, and that they're where they're going to be used, rather than creating spaces that are only used by one group, are shut for most of the day, and that other groups don't feel they can actually use. So that's all part of the planning that has to go on, and the consideration in the development plan.
Yeah, libraries are actually, like, I have to say, Mairead and her team are fantastic. We're developing an integration strategy for Dublin at the moment, and libraries are key. Funny enough, it is that space that everyone seems to go to, and no matter what language you speak, it seems like a good safe haven. And I think we need more, and we need to plan on how we develop it. I know there's a Dublin 8 one coming in the plans. John, there's two questions. One question I'm going to ask both of you, but this specific one, I feel bad if I don't ask for Sinead here. In relation to green spaces, are there any plans to allow planning permission for roof gardens in the city centre? Because there's lots of kind of terrace houses that have no gardens and these flat roofs. So are there any plans to allow for roof gardens?
Well, yeah, roof gardens are provided for and encouraged in the development plan already. You know, it's there. We will refine and develop that. Again, there's roof gardens for recreational purpose, and there's roof gardens for water, urban drainage attenuation as well, and for biodiversity. So again, it's a complex issue. So some people like their pitched roofs and don't like flat roof for a roof garden. Some people, when we go out to the community as a consultation exercise, object to roof gardens because it'll invade their privacy with overlay. So there are all these things to be balanced here. But and that's why I make maybe it's from my perspective just in here in the planning department, but we do need, if we're going to work together as a city and to enjoy urbanism and all of those good things, we do need to be more civic in our thinking and to think of our future generations and always and not just think of yourself and think about your first port of call is to lift a pen to object, but to think of how you might contribute to or how a proposal or development might contribute to the city and for our future generations. It's really important, I think, to think about that.
Okay, well, in one sentence, how will you both describe Dublin's identity as a city? So one sentence before we wrap up. John and then Ali. Ali's there going, I can't put it in one sentence. John.
Sorry. So I would. Well, I'm a blow-in to Dublin, as you can detect. I think Dublin is a resilient city. It's a city of character, and it's a city of exchanging. It's not just exchanging goods. Dublin's great because it exchanges ideas. And any city that exchanges ideas is a resilient city, and I think that's the great thing about Dublin.
Okay, I'm moving to you, Ali. John, don't worry. Some people call me a blow-in. So, Ali.
It's a city of chat and stories. It's got a great personality, Dublin. I would like to see us having more belief I'd like, you know, and Ireland to have more belief in its capital city. We're the capital city. So that is something, but it has great charm. Charming chat, full of stories.
Okay, so this wraps up our Chu and Chat for this afternoon. Again, everyone who has contributed questions, thank you so much. If we haven't got back to your questions, please email us at lordmayor@dublincity.ie. I want to say massive thank you to John and Ali. They've been great to work with this year, and we've been chatting a lot, especially in recent months about Gulliston, but about other parts of the city. And I know lots of people here are interested in knowing what will happen after COVID. Like, we're also terrified, and it's been so awful during COVID that everyone's trying to look forward on what the next iteration would be. So like hearing you say, Ali, that like belief and hope, I think that's a lot to do with it. And John, as you said, more contribution, less objections would be good. So yes, so thank you so much to both of you and your team. And yeah, everyone, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.